I was the first person in my family to ever go to college, and I didn't really know what I was doing when I went to college, but I knew I wanted to be a writer somehow. I'd known that since I was very young. So when I went to college, I took a history course, and I was fascinated by history, so I ended up being a history major. I never took a social science course ever once. And then right after college, I transitioned, so I'm a trans man. And as part of that process for me, I started doing drop-in work with queer youth at a drop-in shelter in Portland, Oregon, where I'm from. And the experiences of those kids was completely different from my experience, and they were only 5 years younger than me. And the difference was that they came of age during the internet, and that was not really a big popular thing at the time when I was finishing college. It was just kind of emerging. And so I wanted to better understand how their world was different from mine, and I thought, well, I'll just go read about it. And so I went to Powell's bookstore, which is the biggest, best independent bookstore in the world, and there was nothing, or very little. And so I thought, well, if there aren't books, I'll write them. I'm a medical anthropologist, and what I say I do is I study the politics and practice of transgender medicine and mostly surgery. So when I say I study the politics, I mean the sort of contests for power that are always happening around transgender medicine. And so one of the questions I ask is, why are people continuing to fight so much about the questions of how people can change the sex and gendered characteristics of their body? Who is in charge of making those decisions impact the people whose lives and bodies are changed by those interventions. So that's the politics part. And the practice part is, how do you actually go about changing sex and gender? As an anthropologist, that's an interesting question because we don't know what sex and gender are. They change depending on where you are, who you are, what time you live in, your class status, your racial status. All of these things are different. So when a surgeon goes into an operating room, they have to make a decision about those things. So if the question is, what is sex and gender, when you are the one in charge of building them, then that's a really interesting question. I wrote a book in 2017 called The Look of a Woman, Facial Feminization Surgery and the Aims of Trans Medicine, and it was awarded the Ruth Benedict Prize by the Association of Queer Anthropology as the best book of the year on a queer or trans topic. Right now I'm really interested in experimental and emerging medicine that's imagining the tissues taken from trans folks during their reconstructive surgeries as resources. The way I've imagined the project is called Architectures of Manhood. That's about different technologies to replace, repair, and rehabilitate male genitalia. Soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan right now are experiencing the highest rates of genital injury ever in the history of war because they're walking outside of their jeeps and stepping on bombs that explode up to the underside of their body and result in genital injury. And so the military is wondering what they can do about this, and one of the big initiatives has been to fund tissue engineering, and that's where trans bodies come in, because trans bodies end up being the source of the tissue scaffolds. So at the same time that you have trans folks being explicitly excluded from military service, you have the absolute utility of those bodies being needed to recuperate the American masculinity. My advice would be that I think a lot of young people imagine that whatever they major in has to be the name of a job. And that's really not true at all. And part of what you learn as a student in anthropology is to read critically, to think critically, to ask good questions, to consider an issue from multiple perspectives. And no matter what field you go into, that's valuable. To think very broadly about what you can do and what all of the skills that you learn in an anthropology program set you up to do well.